Assalamu alaikum my students. I hope you people are doing well. Well, I am Ramsha Farooq once again with you with our English text lessons. As you know that we were doing our lessons from our book Oxford Progressive English Book 7 by Richard Redford, and we were doing unit number 6 lessons. Previously we have done lesson number 1, which was lessons from the folktale. Now today I bring you here lesson number 2, which is lessons from the poetry. And today in the lesson number 2, we will be doing Revenge, a poem by Luis E.M. Godoy. Right now, before moving towards our poem, let's first check it out what actually poetry is. A poetry is a type of literature or artistic writing that attempts to stir readers' imagination or emotions. The poet does this by carefully choosing and arranging language for its meanings, sounds, and rhythms. A poetry is basically a form of self expression that has no boundaries, that knows no boundaries. A poetry is itself an artistic expression of someone's feeling or an expression of something in a form of an artistic writing that it has no boundary within it. Right now, there are three kinds of poetry, kinds or genres of poetry. Right, so number 1 is narrative, number 2 is dramatic, and number 3 is lyrical. Now, narrative poetry is a poem that tells us the story. Like we are having an example here, Little Red Riding Hood by Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl is basically a very famous poet. He wrote the poem Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf in a form of a narration, as Little Red Riding Hood itself was a story. So Mr. Dahl just derived it in an artistic writing. So he changed that narrative, the story, into a poem, right? So this is how a narrative poetry is. Now, the second one which we are having is dramatic. Dramatic monologue, mean to be acted upon. That means monologue. First of all, let's check it out what monologue is. Monologue is a sort of a long speech of a character in a dramatic way in a drama or in a theater. A person or a single character is basically telling something about his feeling, his thought in a long speech. This is what a monologue is. A dramatic monologue or a dramatic poetry is a poetry that must be acted upon. It is a sort of a narrative. It is similar to narrative poetry as well, because it itself has a story in a form of dramatized way, in a form of drama, or in a form of play here. Okay, now the third kind of poetry is lyrical poetry. A lyrical poem is a short, highly musical verse that conveys powerful feelings, right? Basically, a lyrical poem is a short, highly musical verse. Basically, it is a private expression of emotion by a single speaker, or he is basically telling his feeling or he's sharing his feeling through his artistic writing, either by himself or someone is writing about the other person's feeling, right? So we are having the examples of simply nursery rhymes. Mostly nursery rhymes is basically some sort of a lyrical poem, right? So this is what actually a short introduction of a poetry. Now what actually poetry is. I hope you people understood the concept of poetry here. Now let's move towards our poem Revenge, Revenge by Luis Enrique Mejia Godoy. Now this poem is on page number 147 of your Oxford Progressive English Book 7 by Richard Redford. So as I have asked you before to read the poem, I hope you have done. But if you haven't done the poem, just don't worry. Pause the video and then read the poem and then get back to me. We will be discussing the structure and vocabulary of the poem in detail. Now, as you have read the poem, now let's discuss the structure of the poem Revenge. Now, as you can see here, this poem, as I told you before, it is a lyrical poem. Now, what lyrical poem is? Lyrical poem, as I have told you before, it is a short or highly musical verse that conveys a powerful feeling. A lyrical poem is a private expression of an emotion by a single speaker. So here in Revenge, who is telling his private expression? Thomas Borge. He is basically conveying his feeling, powerful feeling about how he felt while he was in a prison, while he was getting tortured. So he told the poem in a way, like in his private expression, in a private feeling, and it is a basically it's very a strong feeling. It's a very strong feeling. How? Because he is telling his feelings while he was in the prison. Clear? Now, as it is a lyrical poem, and now let's check it out. What type of poem it is? What stanzas are there in it? Okay. Now, it is basically a quatrain. Now, quatrain is basically a poem which consists of stanzas with 4 lines. Now it is basically like a quatrain is a type of stanza or a complete poem consisting of 4 lines. Now here you can see we are having 1, 2, 3, 4. Like first we are having in a stanza like 4 lines. So this is basically a poem with stanza of 4 lines. So this is why the structure of the poem, the structure of a stanza in this poem is quatrain, which consists of 4 lines. Clear? Now, before moving towards the vocabulary of this poem, first check it out. Who was Thomas Borge? Basically, Thomas Borge was a political prisoner and he was a renowned statesman and a writer and a politician as well. Right? Now, he was a co-founder of Sandinista National Liberation Front in Nicaragua and was interior minister of the same country during one of the administration of Daniel Ortega. He was put under a house arrest, like as I told you, he was a political prisoner. So he was put into a house arrest from 1956 to 1959 during the government crackdown following the assassination of Somoza. Now Somoza was a leader and a dictator of that city and of that country, right? So under his supervision he was kept as a prisoner. Why he was kept as a prisoner? Because due to his liberal thinking about the political environment in that era, okay, about the country, like he was a person of a liberal thinking. He don't believe in a dictatorship type of a control or like that. So this is why he was kept as a political prisoner there. So Otto Castro, a friend of Borge and a president of Honduras at time, arranged for Borge's release, and then when he was released after this period of time, so what happened is he became the president and he started a sort of a revolution movement in which he wants to make the city and the basically a political movement about liberation, right? So he wanted to make the people think in a liberal way, right? So this is why he started from movement, and in future he became the National Liberation, the co-founder of and basically the president of National Liberation Front, okay, in his city, right? Now, as you were thinking, like, what is a relationship with this poem of Thomas Borge? As I told you before, like he was telling his personal feeling in a form of the poem Revenge. Like Thomas Borge went to write the poem Revenge with Luis Enrique Mejia Godoy about his act of personal revenge against his torturers. He wanted to tell people what happened during his while he was being tortured, what were his feelings. And in the poem Revenge, he is basically describing that how he will take revenge against the torturers who torture him during the time he was imprisoned, right? He was imprisoned with his family and being tortured at that time. So the personal revenge is like a basically feelings of Thomas Watts, in which he wanted to tell how he will take revenge against his torturers. Now let's move towards the vocabulary of this poem, Revenge. Now, our first word from the vocabulary list is dictatorship. Dictatorship means an absolute rule, a single party rule. It is a form of a government in which a person or a small group rules with almost ultimate power. They used to just rule by themselves. They don't listen to public. They just take everything in their rule. They whatever they want, they do on a in a form of like they want to dictate everything, right? Now, another word we are having is revolution. Now, revolution means change, a movement of often violent or in a form of which who wants change, right? It is a basically a movement for which it is like they want to change the system of the government or something like that. It is basically sort of a political movement, right? Now, in which it refers to a movement often violent to overthrow an old system and effect complete change in a fundamental institution of a society. They want to change the system of a society. This is what a revolution movement is. Now, our third word here is interior. Now, interior is basically not that interior in which we are talking about our interior design of our home, not that. Interior means a remote area from a coast or a frontier inland, right? It is basically like, for example, frontier inland in a means like in Pakistan we are living in Karachi. So Sindh is a province, and interior Sindh like a rural area or a remote area in which there is no such development sort of thing is there. So this is what an interior or a remote area is called, an interior. This is like a remote area, right? Interior Sindh we call it in Pakistan, right? Now, another word we are having is torturer, which means a person who tortures, who gives pain to someone, physical or mental pain, in order to convince someone to do something or give information in a sort of an interrogation. Like you can see that during the interrogative session of in a language of a cops or a police, they used to interrogate the criminals in a way to give the information. This is how an interrogation means, right? To convince someone. Torture means like in his case, he was being tortured. Thomas Bot was being tortured physically and mentally in order to convince or convince in a way that convince to change his liberal thinking, right? He was being tortured, right? Now, another word we are having is firm. Firm means in a resolute or determined manner. To stay strong, to stay firm, in which a firm belief, a complete belief, which we call, right? Now, another word which we are having is victory. Victory is basically, everyone knows victory means success, right? An act of defeating an enemy or opponent in a battle game or other competition and become successful, right? And win something. This is what a victory is, right? Now, another word we are having is tenderness. Tenderness means gentleness, to be gentle or to be kind with someone, right? Another word we have here is intact. Intact means not damaged or impaired in any way, complete, right? Which means that it is not actually damaged. The other word which we are having here is National Liberation Front. Now, National Liberation Front means a revolutionary movement that seeks the national independence of a country, usually by guerrilla warfare. Now, what actually guerrilla warfare is? Now, here guerrilla doesn't mean like that animal gorilla. Guerrilla means here little. That means little war, in which little war means that some of the irregular soldier or some small group of people start to fight with a large group of people here, right? And as you can see in a revolutionary movement, like people used to do protest and sort of thing in a way. So this is what a guerrilla warfare is, where a small group of people are coming in contact with other large group of people in a way of war, in a way of fight. This is what a guerrilla warfare is, right? Now another word we are having is bursting. Bursting means feel a very strong or irrepressible emotion or impulse, right? Here a very strong feeling or very strong emotion, feeling of very strong emotion is known as bursting, right? Now another word we are having is here implacable. Implacable means unable to be stopped, or relentless. Then no one can stop that type of person who is implacable, right? Now the second last word which we are having here is combat. Combat means non-violent conflict or opposition, right? Now the last word which we are having is, it is not that difficult word, but it is a word in our vocabulary here. It is generous. Generous means to show kindness towards others, or to
Now, as we have done with the vocabulary, now let's move towards the exercise which is given on page number 147 of your book, Reading for Understanding and Interpretation. Now, our question, as you can see here, the question number 1 consists of 3 questions. So, I have divided here question number 1 into 3 parts, which is A, B, and C. Now, question number 1A is, what is revenge? You have to write down the literal meaning, that what actually revenge is. Here you have to write down the definition or a literal meaning, or what do you think revenge is, right? So you have to write down this in. And now here question number 1B is, what kind of feelings are associated with revenge? You have to write down here the feeling of a person who wants to take revenge from someone else, how he was feeling, like he was feeling jealous, he was feeling negative, he wants to harm that person in a way of revenge. Like there are so many negative feelings, right? So you have to write down the feelings, the kind of feelings that are associated with revenge. Here, clear? Now in question number 1C, you have to give an example of somebody who might want to take revenge on someone else. Like you can write down here a fictitious story here, you can make it by yourself, or you can here share your personal experience, that if some, like if somebody wants to take revenge on someone, what he will do, and in return what a person do in revenge. Clear? Now here in question number 2, we are having, you have to explain some of the improvement which Thomas Borch, the political prisoner, wants to see in his country. Here you have to write down or list down the improvements he wants to see in his country after he was released, right? You just need to write down the improvement, what do you think and what he think the improvement should be made in a country, right? So you have to write down these points here. Now in question number 3, in the poem, Borch describes 6 different ways in which he will have revenge on his torturers. What are the 6 ways? You have to list down the 6 ways which is mentioned in the stanzas there. So you have to list down the 6 ways, what are the improvements he wants to, different ways he wants to take revenge on his torturers, right? Now, here we are having question number 4 as well. So, in question number 4, in the second verse, why do you think the torturers dare not to lift his head? You have to write down, like, why the torturers dared not to lift his head in front of Thomas Borch when he was released. This is because after so much pain, after so much tortures the torturer gave to him during his imprisonment, he just forgave them and wants to improve the country system, the system of the country. He just want to change everything. So they were like in a form, in a way of shock. They were amazed that how a person can forgive us, like we tortured him in a very painful manner and he just forgave us. So they were feeling shame. They are having a feeling of shame that what we have done to this type of person, right? So this is what you have to mention in detail in question number 4. Now here we are having a second last question. How does Bor's desire for revenge differ from the usual revenge which you describe in question number 1? You have to compare the actual meaning of revenge, the actual revenge, and the revenge of Thomas Borch, and you have to write down the comparison. Like in an actual way, the person feels jealous and wants to harm other person to which he was taking revenge with, or but here in case of Thomas Botch, he just forgave his torturers and his revenge was to forgive them and make improvement in his country. So this is what you have to write down in detail in this question number 5, right? Now in question number 6, you have to write down which quality of a character do you think are needed in for a man tortured in prison to forgive his torturers as this man does. Who this man? Thomas Bosch. You have to write down the characteristics and the quality of a person. Like the qualities could be like he is courageous, he is generous, and other qualities like what do you think? You have to write down in your own words, right? You have to just write down the characteristics of the person here, right? So here we have done with the exercise here. I hope you can write down in a proper way here.
Now that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope this video gave you relevant information regarding this chapter, this poem Revenge. So just like my video, subscribe my channel and just click the bell icon above the screen so that you can get more videos and more notifications regarding my channel. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.